Yeah, I'm just going to talk about the place names actually. I've spoken on other occasions on what Maeshowe might have meant to the people who broke into it in the 12th century. Not going so much into that now, a little bit. But this is Maeshowe, standing right in the middle of the Orkney Mainland. You know what, I'll come down here, it feels too formal to be up there. Yeah, it's right in the middle of the Orkney Mainland on the main thoroughfare, and it's very visible in the landscape, as you can see. It's also in the heart of Neolithic Orkney World Heritage Area. It's a 5,000-year-old burial mound, been known for that, but also famous for its runic inscriptions that were added much later in the mid-12th century. So we call it Maeshowe, but in the Orkney saga and in one of the runic inscriptions in the mound itself, it has another name, and that is Orkahaugr in the saga, or Orkahaugr in the runic inscription, so two variations of that name. My purpose today is to discuss both or all three of these names under the premise that they were both coined by Old Norse speakers. I'm going to ask which stories these names can tell about how the people who coined them visualized the mound, its exterior and its interior, but more importantly its content and its meaning. What does it mean to them? Because I think a theme that's come through very strongly in this conference is about the continual need for new meaning making. We all have to tell stories to interpret our world around us, as it is what people have done in all times. And this morning I was in a panel about stories concerning renewable energy, but it's the same kind of process of meaning making. So Maeshowe first. The name is a bit of a mystery, or Maes is a mystery. How is clear enough because it means mound. There have been several suggestions about what Maes means. Hugh Marwick is a renowned scholar of the Scandinavian language in Orkney, and he was puzzled by this. He remarks it's a very puzzling word. He observes first that there are parallels elsewhere in Orkney too. This is his passage from his book where he discusses those parallels. The first one he cites is Maeshowe in the parish of Ham, here on the Orkney Mainland, and he's heard it pronounced Maeshowe as well. I've seen this mound myself. I've heard a local folk etymology which says that the mound stands in association with a former medieval church and a path called the Mass Gate, where people would walk to Mass in church. Mark doesn't mention that folk etymology, but he comments that he's heard it pronounced Maeshowe, which makes it more similar to Maeshowe. Then he mentions Meser in Sandy, which he derives from a plural form, Maeshaugar, rather than just Haug. And then he has Mount Misery, now called Mount Misery, in Sandy. Then finally he has Hawa May in North Ronaldsay, same thing, but the elements are turned round. And then he has some Maes places that are not mounds. Maes Lee, a beach in Chaplaincy, Maes Teng in Jersey, Maes Quay, a field in Harry, and Maes Dale, a field in Bury. And then I set out to see if I could find any more. I didn't find any more Maes, but I found lots of May without the S. For example, Maybach in Papa Westry, where I recently found a very exciting Norse grave. And then now, so Maybach next to it, which are mounds. May Cottage in Papa Westry, but I don't know how old that name is. and there's a castle of May, also in a folk story in Papa Westry. All that is just in one tiny island, Papa Westry. So Marek never concludes it never forms a firm opinion on what maize means. He suggests that it might be a Celtic word, meaning a field or a plain, reflected in Welsh ma or mas and Gaelic ma. Can anyone pronounce Gaelic here? He cites Jakobsen, Jakob Jakobsen, who thought that it had extended its meaning to mounds or small hillocks from field or plain, but he thinks that is a bit improbable, because Jakobsen's reason was that it's evidently used like that in Orkney, so that's a bit of a circular argument. So Marwick's own suggestion is that it comes from Gaelic mas and Old Irish mas, meaning a buttock. His only firm conclusion is that maize is not Norse. But in contrast to this stands the Norwegian place name scholar Berit Sandnes, who suggests that it is Norse and that it derives from Maeshowe, meaning mound in a meadow, which is found in East Norse. Not usually in West Norse, but in other Germanic languages, including the English word med, or the med in meadow itself comes from the same root. But the point of my talk today is not what it really meant to those who coined it in the first place, but how it's been interpreted to help us make sense of the place in different time periods and by different people, like what Jay was also talking about earlier. So it means something to the listeners, not just to the speaker who first said the name. It creates pictures in our heads, and we build our own interpretations upon the name. So the name can mean different things to different groups of people, separated by geography, social networks, or time, as popular understandings of names change through history. And regarding this last point, I've known Jay Johnson for a few years now, and I was very, very excited, both by her talk today and by the dissertation she wrote on the Victorian responses to Maeshowe, and how they were very excited by the runes and imagined it as a sorcery hall, among other things. Yes, so during the excavation in 1861, the mound was interpreted in the light of current ideas, Victorian ideas. For example, the inscription of Ingebjørg the Fair Widow was interpreted as Ingebjørg the Fair Widow, the Merk Queen, has here decreed the depressed to become greatly exalted. That was in the proceedings of the Society of Antiquaries of Scotland. So sometimes interpretations say more about the interpreters than they say about the Vikings who carved the runes. I think we can take a similar approach to how the place name has been interpreted. There's been a steady subscription to the theory that it means the mound of the maidens. Maidens Mound, as you can see an example of here from 1882 to 84. And you can still find that online, particularly, and in old guidebooks. I've even heard one or two Maeshowe guides mention this. The Maidens Mound. Who are these maidens? Is it Ingebjørg? So there's a whole landscape of maidens online. Another more fanciful one that came across was that it was a temple for the goddess May, a goddess of spring. It might sound like I'm sneering a bit now, but my point is that these stories help people make sense of place in their own heads. So the stories are important responses, even if they're quite far removed from the original intended meaning. Now, Orkahaugr or Orkahaugr. There are two forms of that name, one with an A and one without an A. Are they two variants of the same name, or do they have different meanings? And what do they mean anyway? What meanings do they convey? The variant Orkahaugr is found in the Orkney saga, written around 1200, in an episode where Harald Madadarsson and his team are travelling from Stromness to Finstone and are surprised by the kind of weather we had earlier today and have to take shelter, maybe even a bit worse than what we had. And they say Earl Harald began his journey at Yule out in Orkney. He had 4 ships and 100 men. He lay 2 nights by Grimsey, then they landed in Hamnavoe or Stromness, and they went from there on the 13th day of Christmas towards Firth or Finstone. They were in Orkahaugr while there was a blizzard, and 2 men went crazy for them, which slowed their journey a lot. It was night when they came to Firth. So here's Orkahaugr. And in the manuscript it's spelled Orkahaugr, so I've misspelled Haug, but that A is very clearly there. In the runic inscription, see on the wall here, it says Jord salafarer brute Orkahaugr liv matseljar reist. Jerusalem travelers broke into Orkahaugr, leave the Earl's housekeeper carved. So I'll first discuss the element orc before going into the compounds and whether they convey different meanings or not. So what immediately springs to mind is of course orc in the name of the archipelago, Orkney. Old Norse Orkneyar. The orc element predates the Norse settlement of the islands, and it's attested in early Irish as in the Ork, islands of the Boar. Also several Roman sources for the orc element. Some of them copy one another though. For example, Diodorus Siculus, who wrote in the 1st century BC, Britain is triangular in shape, very much as is Sicily, but its sides are not equal. This island stretches obliquely along the coast of Europe, and the point where it is least distant from the mainland, we're told, is the promontory that men call Cantium, blah 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 blah, and then you get to the top here, and that is named Orka. And here in this map we have the tiny here, and Orka, this could just be seen there. So it seems to be the tip of Caithness that's called Cape Orca first, and then the islands are called Orkneys. In Old Norse, the name Orkneyar, the Celtic, or maybe even Pictish, we don't know, orc, has been replaced by the similar sounding Old Norse Orken, which means a seal. Seal Islands is very fitting for Orkney, but it's only a reinterpretation of an older name, accompanied by folk etymology, maybe about seals. The real question is, was the orc name conveyed to the invading Vikings in the early 9th century by the local population of the island? We don't have any Pictish source. It might be that the Norwegians or the invading Vikings had heard it through contact with other European peoples too, so that they called it orc, but we don't know what the Picts call it themselves. They may or may not have called it orc something. But in any case, I find it very likely that the Vikings thought of the local Picts as the orc people in one way or another, whoever they may have heard it from. Now, over to Orkahaugr or Orkahaugr. The orc in Orkahaugr could refer to something else entirely. Let's imagine that first, that it has nothing to do with the island name. If it's something else entirely, it could refer to the shape of the mound. For example, a shape of a round with a chest. There's a runic inscription on a chest that reads like this. It's from Norway. Ragnhild Gerildar Ork. Ragnhild made their ork, where ork is like ark or a round little chest. So maybe Maeshowe looks like a chest, maybe that's what it is. So that's a definite possibility, and then Orkahaugr could be a compound of that, chest, mound. It doesn't work so well for Orkahaugr though, because to get that A there, it would have to be genitive plural, the mound of the chest. And in that case, the O would change to A, Orkahaugr. So that doesn't work for that. Alternatively, as Hugh Marwick suggests, Ork could be a term of elevation of a projection generally. For example, he's supported by citing Orkney in Ansten Shetland, which is a cliff, the Muckle and the Little Orka for two hills in Ljosland in Shetland, and Ness of Ork in Chappensea in Orkney. However, let us now consider the possibility that the name Orkahaugr or Orkahaugr does have to do with the name of the archipelago, Orkney. For example, it could have originated as an extrinsic name, used by Icelanders and Scandinavians to refer to the most significant mound in the Orkney Islands. So the mound, the Orkney mound kind of thing. It could have acquired some fame through a role as an assembly site. And this explanation would make sense whether the form of the name is Orkahaugr or Orkahaugr, where if it's Orkahaugr, the grammar might be interpreted as weak masculine plural genitive of Orkar, where Orkar would be the people of Orkney. The Orkney saga is preserved in Icelandic manuscript and was arguably composed in Iceland, with Arcadian input. There's discussions on that. Although an Arcadian origin has also been put forward. But the point is, an extrinsic name like that for Maeshowe is not unexpected in the saga, but it's a bit unexpected in the runic inscription, because who was Liv, the Earl's housekeeper? Was she a native Arcadian, or had she grown up in Orkney? If she was working for the Earl here, she must have been here for quite some time anyway. Why would she use a kind of outsider name for Orkahaugr? So that makes it more likely that the name Orkahaugr was used in Orkney too for Maeshowe. And so what does that say about the vision of Maeshowe by people in the Isles? If it was named Orkahaugr or Orkahaugr by the Norse population who first replaced the Picts, the Ork element could refer to the former rulers as a tribal name, the Ork people. So the naming there would reflect the fact that Maeshowe is older than the Norse settlement, and that it's understood as a significant landmark at the point of Norse colonization. And then the A in Orkahaugr could be explained as a masculine genitive plural of Orkar, where Orkar is again the people name, but this time the people, the Orcadians who were here before the Vikings came, those Orcadians. So then it's possible to imagine a later development where memories of these predecessors were fading, and Orkahaugr or Orkahaugr is understood less specifically as the mound of those who were here before. So we now see three different scenarios, which could all plausibly explain the name. Yeah, that was the Maeshowe Jarlsien. But I wish to stress at this point that the understanding of the name is not necessarily static or constant. It could be understood as a description of the mound's shape by one group of people, and as a reference to the name of the archipelago by others, for example by Icelanders and Norwegians, and referring to the former culture inhabiting the islands by yet others at different times in different places. So there's one scenario left to discuss, and that's where the mound is seen as the burial place of somebody specific, and who was that? So this specific person might be mythological, for example, an ancient king in a mythological past. So the size and prominence of the mound in the landscape would lend itself to such thinking. The name Orkahaugr then could be taken as a weak masculine genitive singular derived from a personal name, Orki. Orki's mound is then the name of the mound. So Orki is not a regularly attested Old Norse personal name. It's not recorded in Western Scandinavia. Traces exist in Denmark and in the Danelaw and possibly in Sweden, according to Barnes. However, there's a remarkable use of it in what seems to be a patronymic in Maeshowe itself here, where it says, it's said to me that wealth is concealed here well enough. Few say as other Orkason said in those runes which he carved. So somebody's got the patronymic Orkason there. And Barnes is very puzzled by this. He suggests that unless it was actually a regular name, meaning something like the Arcadian, the inscription could be meant as a pun on the name Orkahaugr, and to that I want to add that it could be a further pun on this barrel-like or chest-like shape of somebody. In any case, it's conceivable that the name Orkahaugr or Orkahaugr was understood in the 12th century when the runes were made as the mound of someone named Orki. In parallel, for example, to Ragnhild in Norway, Halvdanshaugen in Norway, and Anundshaugen in Sweden, which in folk memory are understood as the mounds of Ragnhild and Halvdan and Anund. And this understanding could then furthermore be connected with a foundation myth, with the purpose of explaining the archipelago name, Orkney. And there are many parallels to this. For example, from Suldal in Rogaland in Norway comes the story that the area got its name from a king Sold. The first people to settle in Suldal had come from the Sausokno parishes. It was a boy and a girl who desired one another, but their parents were much against it, so there couldn't be a traditional wedding. They eloped and settled in Suldal. Soon other people followed, so many that they needed a king. They got a king whose name was Sold. After him, the valley was named Soldal, and this later became Suldal. So, a king Sold of Suldal is certainly not the only eponymous king of a district in Norway. In the first chapter of the Orkney saga, we have a story about how Norway was founded. There we also hear of a king Sokni of Soknefjord. And from Fritjof's saga, we have a king Ring of Ringeriki. And even more excitingly here, we have a king Nor of Norway, giving a name to the entire kingdom of Norway. After that, Nor went to the fjord that is called Norfjord. And then he took the whole of the mainland, and all the land that he'd laid under him was called Norveg. And then we have King Dan of Denmark. This is from Saxo Grammaticus. Now Dan and Angul, with whom the stock of the Danes begins, were begotten of Humble their father, and were governors, and not only the founders of our race. And these mounds are reputed to be burial, at least one of them, and to be the burial of King Dan. That one's from Schleswig, but Dan's mounds are dotted over Denmark. There's at least 6 of them, documented by Lidegard, but his inventory is not exhaustive, so there might be even more of them. There's another story of King Dan of Denmark. This one in Latin, translation of the Lost Trollunga saga. So I believe that Maeshowe Chamber Tomb was at one point in time in the 12th century, perhaps sometime before or after, understood in such terms. That is, as a folk etymology, but that it is a folk etymology doesn't matter, because the important thing is that what people understood it as, not what it really means. I've argued elsewhere that this kind of folk etymology, Orkney's mound, also ties in nicely with the apparent interpretation of Maeshowe as one of these burial mounds that Nella talked about, where there's a haugbui or hogboy, an ancestor spirit who's turned into a kind of demonic creature that you can go and fight and get the treasure off if you're a saga hero. So in conclusion, while the original meanings of the names Maeshowe and Orkahaugr or Orkahaugr are still uncertain, I find value in exploring how these names may have been understood by different people at different times, from Maeshowe as the mound of the maidens in the Victorian period, to Orkahaugr as the mound of King Orki and his treasure in medieval Norwegian Orkney. Thank you.